Hi, this is a video for IB Psychology students, and it's about paper 1 and how to answer those first 3 questions that you will have in your paper 1. So if I show you an example of a paper, there are 2 sections, section A and section B. Section B is longer essays, and we'll talk about this in another video. But for now, you need to worry about those section A questions. There are 3 questions worth 8 marks each, so that's a total of 24 marks, obviously. And so, given that paper 1 is worth half of all your IB points, you can see how important this section A is. Section B is worth 22 marks, so this is even more important than section B. So we're going to look at what you need to do when you're answering one of those questions. The first thing you need to know is that those questions are all compulsory. There's no choice. Whereas in part B you do have a choice, in part A there is no choice. You need to answer every single of those 3 questions. That means you need to know everything. It's really to check your knowledge of psychology. So as I said, they are worth 8 marks each, 24 marks in total. And there will always be one question for each level of analysis. So that means one question will be about the biological level, one about the cognitive level, and one will be social-cultural level. So there are certain things you need to include in a question. That seems obvious, that you need to answer the question, but you can't imagine how many students do not do that. They just see a word that they recognize and they just go with it without really reading the command term. So what we call the command term is on the exam paper. For example, explain how one hormone influences human behavior. The command term here is explain. And it will be very different from this one, describe, or this one, outline. They all mean something specific. And of course we will learn about all these different meanings, but you really need to pay attention because sometimes the answer can be completely different. What students tend to do is just read that second bit. So, oh yes, it's about hormones, great, I know about hormones, and they just write everything they know about hormones, and they don't pay attention to the fact that they were asked to explain how it influences behavior and focus on one hormone. So they'll just go on and on about 2 hormones, or they'll just describe a hormone and not explain how it influences behavior. So you just need to read the question properly. And those command terms, I can't stress how important they are. If we have a quick look at this is called Bloom's taxonomy. We will study it, and it goes through all the different skills that you need to study anything, but in psychology they are very important because the command terms are completely based on this taxonomy. So if you want to do well in your exam, you need to understand this pyramid. In paper 1, section A, you're not asked to do this. You're only asked to do mainly this and a little bit of this, okay? So we are talking about what we call lower level skills and mid-level skills. Doesn't mean they're not as important. You're just not doing this, okay? We'll come back to this in a minute. So the kind of command terms you might be asked to answer will be things like define, describe, outline, state, and slightly more difficult, sometimes you will be asked to analyze, apply, distinguish, or explain, but you will not be asked to compare or discuss or evaluate or anything like that. So they remain fairly simple command terms. I would always include a study or a reference to research, at least one. You don't have the space to include loads, but sometimes students really skillfully go into some depth into one and then refer to another. That's fine. I would never have too many, but one is always necessary. If you don't include one, then you can't really get the marks. And the reason is, if we have a look at the mark bands. So that's what teachers use to grade you, and that includes examiners. So we're not even going to look at those bad ones at the bottom. We're going to focus on the really good one. So in order to do well, you need to answer in a focused and effective manner and meet the demands of the command term. So here's your command term. Focused is very important. That means you can't just go on and on about irrelevant stuff. Otherwise, you don't meet that criteria of focused. And very importantly, the response is supported by appropriate and accurate knowledge and understanding of research. So if you don't have a study in there, if you don't have any reference to research, you can't possibly meet that criteria here, and so you can't possibly get to 7 or 8. You need to have a reference to research, and you need to prove that what you're saying is founded in research. So there are things that you should not include. For example, evaluation. Analysis, sometimes the command term might ask for a little bit of analysis, but that's very rare actually. Even when you're explaining, you're not really analyzing yet. Evaluation, certainly not. So don't say, this is a good study because blah, blah, blah. That's not the place to do that. You don't have the time or the space. Don't include too many studies, and don't include irrelevant information. The answer, all in all, should be about 250 words, perhaps 300, depending on, on the speed of writing. The exam is 2 hours long, so I would recommend that you spend 1 hour on part B to write your essay properly, and therefore you should have about an hour to answer those 3 8-mark questions. That gives you 20 minutes per question. You do not have time to do anything except from answer that question in a good, deep way, but not, you can't go on and on. So I would spend 20 minutes per question. I would spend at least 3-4 minutes really reading the question and planning my answer, and then I would write. So that will take you an hour, and usually, maybe depending on the size of your writing, I would say a good page, one side basically is a good size for a part A answer. I hope that helps, and make sure you ask me if you have more questions.